We are talking about how to stick to your exercise program, your strength training, your health plan, whatever it is this year. We're talking about the mechanisms you need to have in place to make sure that you're absolutely successful over the long term. No more grasping onto something for a couple of weeks and then forgetting about it. Okay. So we need three mechanisms we're talking about: willpower, which we talked about in the first video. If you haven't seen that video, go find that one and watch that one first. In this video, we're going to talk about motivation and that the whole mechanism to keep yourself motivated. And in the third video, we'll talk about discipline. So motivation. How do you set up a motivational engine that works properly? Well, a lot of people are talking online about how discipline is more important than motivation. That's a fundamental misunderstanding about how dopamine works. So motivation is driven on an addictive behavior. So addictive behaviors are driven from dopamine release. So if you're the easiest way to explain it is if you're an animal, you're running through a field, and then off in the distance you see a food source. Maybe it's a tree or something like that or whatever, but there's a food source and it's far in the distance. As soon as you see that and you recognize it, dopamine gets released in your system, and it gives you some motivation to move towards that source. As you progress towards that source and you look up and you see that that source is getting closer and closer, every time that you perceive that there's progress towards that source, it releases dopamine in your system. That is the system we need to set up in place. And you do that right until you get to the reward, you get more dopamine for the reward. And the problem with chasing personal bests when it comes to strength training and this sort of stuff, those kind of mechanisms, is there's no distance between you and the absolute goal. If you're chasing a personal best, it's like, you got it, now you got to set up a new one. You got it, you got to set up a new one. Okay? You don't want to be doing that constantly. Not only that, but from a health perspective, personal bests are not the thing that are best for your body. Yes, you want to develop strength over time, but you don't constantly need to get stronger and stronger and stronger, contrary to popular belief. Some people pushing that strength and the highest end of strength is most important. That's, again, a fundamental misunderstanding of how the human body works. So, what do we set up to make sure that you're successful? Well, you need some sort of long-term goal. Okay, so like in the 10,000 pounds program, this is how we set it up. It's, we set up for, so the idea is that you produce 10,000 pounds of force 3 times a week at the very minimum. We have a smart anchor that measures, every repetition and creates an accumulation score for you, whatever. So what you want to do with something like this, and it can be any mechanism, it doesn't need to be ours. What you want to do is you have to start with like a 3-week goal. So in the 10,000 pounds program, it'd be 90,000 pounds, right? Because you're getting 10,000 pounds 3 times a week times 3 weeks. Well, what's happening is you set yourself up for that 90,000 pounds, and maybe you make it an even 100,000 pounds or something like that, so that you can work towards this thing that your brain perceives as this really cool goal. And then you see and you track your progress along the way so that you can see your progress. This is why these accumulation circles, when it comes to like step programs and all this other stuff, that's why they work, because they show you your progress along the way. And if your brain perceives that progress as something significant, then you release dopamine. That feeling of significance is the release of dopamine in your system. It's not a trigger for it. It is the release of it. So that's really important. So you set yourself up initially, maybe something that's like 3 weeks. At the outside of that, so what I've done a lot with my clients in the past is we've done really meaningful goals, like, running a triathlon. I had one client whose daughter wanted to run a triathlon with him. And he was just like, I am not prepared, ready, fit to do this. And I really want to do this with my daughter. Okay, well, we took just over a year to train, a little less than a year. We set him up and made sure that he was successful, because that meaningful goal, working towards that, was like really important to him. and we could measure the progress along the way. Okay, like how far can you bike, and how strong are you feeling, and how's you started with back pain. So, how's is your back pain now resolved? And you need to have a long-term goal, and you need to be able to measure the steps in between. Just having a long-term goal. I heard somebody say this again. Oh, I'm going to lose 100 pounds by, whatever it was, like 9 months from now. It's like, yeah, but what are you doing today, and how are you measuring it? And there was no mechanism for it. And I can tell you right now that he's not going to lose the weight, because it's just, if you don't measure it on a regular basis, you're relying back again on that willpower, and that willpower is just never going to last. So that's motivation. You set yourself up with a long-term goal that you can measure the progress in between, so that you're constantly getting that dopamine, and and really running that dopamine engine as much as possible. Okay, in the next video, we'll talk about discipline and how to set that up properly.